Well, it's been a couple of weeks and I've kept you guys waiting long enough. Hello guys, this is UniversalGiant and welcome to Let's Play the Pokémon Trading Card Game for the Game Boy Color. So, the first video I'm going to be showing is just going to be a brief explanation of how the card game works, followed by a quick tutorial game just so you get an idea as to what it looks like when it's in action. But before those of you who are already familiar with the game go running away to watch something else, I want to give you a reminder that the video for you to suggest different card decks for me to use throughout the game is still available, assuming you're watching this before, say, video 5 or so goes up. So if the video link in the description is still there, you still have time to suggest card decks for me to use, and I will be using card decks that you guys suggest in the comments throughout. So if you have an idea of a card deck that you'd like to see shown off, by all means suggest one in the comments in that video. But today I'm just going to be going through some of the basics of the Pokemon trading card game for those of you who've never seen it before, so that when we finally jump into the game later, you're not too confused as to exactly what's going on. The game itself is structured similar to how you would expect a Pokemon fight to go, where you have a number of Pokemon in your deck, and you each send out one active Pokemon to fight the opponent's Pokemon, as well as a maximum of 5 in your bench or active roster at any time that aren't involved in the fighting. And the game ends either when you beat all of your opponent's Pokemon, or you beat a set total number of their Pokemon. And as you may have seen in the previous video, there are a number of different Pokemon that you can do. Again, this is all from Generation 1, so the Pokemon that you're going to be seeing are just the first 151 or so. And as you can see, there are a number of different aspects to each of the Pokemon cards. So for instance, if you have a Caterpie here, you can see in the top right-hand corner it has a little grass symbol, meaning that all of its attacks are of the grass type. It has a weakness to fire and only to fire, and it has no resistance, meaning that it doesn't resist any certain types. Now, unlike the Pokemon games, there are only 6 different types of Pokemon in this game. There's grass, fire, water, electric, psychic, and fighting, as well as colorless, which serves as the normal type. But there are only 6 kinds of basic energy cards, not including colorless. So regardless of what types they actually have in the normal games, the only types, weaknesses, and resistances that matter are the ones that are listed on the cards themselves, and this can even vary with the same Pokemon for different cards of that Pokemon, so you need to keep that in mind. But in addition to the type, they also have specific attacks, like for instance, String Shot. Not only does it do 10 damage, but it may also have some additional effects in addition to the damage. It also has a brief description, like a Pokedex description. The symbol on the right will either be a circle, a diamond, or a star, and that all depends on how difficult it is to find that particular card. It's the card's rarity. So the weaknesses, if you are struck by an attack of the particular type that your card is weak to, you will take double the damage from that attack, just like you would in the normal games. And if you have a resistance, instead of taking half of the damage, your damage is reduced by a certain number. I think it's 30 damage less, but I'll correct it if I'm wrong. So for instance, if Beedrill takes a fighting type attack, it will not take half of the damage, but it will take a set reduced amount of damage. All the damage that is dealt or taken in the trading card game is in multiples of 10. So I imagine that since there are some attacks that do 10 or 30 or 50 damage, that if you had a resistance and it cut it in half, it would do a multiple of 5 as opposed to 10. And that wouldn't necessarily work. But your Pokemon also have hit points, and as you would expect, if you accumulate more damage than you have hit points, your Pokemon is knocked out. But as you evolve the Pokemon, you can only place down basic Pokemon, which are the ones that have the little green symbol in the top left. Those are your unevolved Pokemon, and those are the only ones that you can put down in play. And in order to evolve them, you have to place another card, their evolution card, on top of them after they've already been in play for at least one turn. So for instance, you can't put down a Kakuna directly onto your bench, only if you already have a Weedle on your bench that has been there for at least one turn. And likewise, for Beedrill, you can't put it down until Kakuna's already there. So you stack the cards on top of each other to evolve them. And as you can imagine, the higher evolutions generally have more health and stronger attacks, but they also require more energy to use. Unlike the Pokemon game standard, your cards require a set number or type of energy cards. Now, energy cards come in the same 6 types that we have here, and this is generally what your decks will consist of. Generally, at least 20 out of 60 cards will be your basic energy cards. And this is what you use to power up your Pokemon's attacks. If your Pokemon cards do not have energy cards on them, they will not be able to attack. So it's very important to have plenty of these on hand. There's also a double colorless energy, which you can only have 4 of. Is a restriction in all of your cards, aside from the 6 basic energy cards, is that you can only have 4 of them in your deck. Basic energies you can have as many as you want, but even double colorless you can only have 4 of. Now, colorless cards are the exception to the specific type of energy that you need, in that any kind of energy can fill the requirement of a colorless or normal type energy. So for instance, Pidgey's Whirlwind attack you can use with a water and a fire energy, it doesn't matter. Or you can also use a double colorless here. But colorless energy cannot be used to supply any type of energy, only colorless. It's a bit confusing, but chances are we won't see many double colorless energies in play anyway. And there are some attacks that require you to flip a coin, that you might discard an energy. There are a number of different things. So whenever you are unfamiliar with a card, it's highly recommended that you at least check it out and figure out what the additional effects are. Any cards that I show for the first time, I will try to explain, but chances are I won't get to explain every single card in the game. That's just how it goes. Pokemon also have a Pokemon power in certain cases, which allows them to do specific things. For instance, Charizard's allows any energy card attached to Charizard to count towards its fire-type requirements. And there are a bunch of other Pokemon powers that are in play too. Generally, you would build your deck around specific cards that have certain Pokemon powers that help you accomplish what you're trying to do. And you also have a retreat cost in some cases, where you can see Charmander and Charmeleon have a retreat cost of 1 colorless energy, or any kind of energy. And that means that in order to retreat your card from the active spot and switch it with one of your Pokemon on the bench, you have to discard one of your energies in order to do it. So if I have 3 energy cards on Charmeleon, I need to discard at least one of them in order to retreat it, meaning that I won't be able to use that energy card again. And likewise, the heavier the Pokemon is, generally it has a higher retreat cost. So if you're looking for, say, a pivot switch, something that you want to be able to get out of the active spot fairly quickly, you'll be looking for a lower retreat cost. But if you know your Pokemon is going to get knocked out on that turn, it may be wise to retreat it, because your opponent will get one more Pokemon of yours knocked out, and that'll get them closer to victory. I think that pretty much covers it for all of the basics here. There are also trainer cards, which allow you to do other general stuff, like discard your hand, draw 7 cards, draw 2 cards for Bill. There are a number of different trainer cards that you can go through. I'll be explaining them as we come across them. But that's pretty much the basics of these themselves. And with that in mind, let's get into a practice game. So this guy also tells us a whole bunch about the rules and stuff, most of which I've already explained to you. The others are easier to explain in an actual match. So this is the first obligatory battle that you'll have to go through when you boot up the game, and it's just about as tutorial-esque as you can get. It's a practice match, so he won't shuffle the deck. He knows exactly what to expect. And at the beginning of the game, you're asked to draw 7 cards from your card deck of 60. And at the beginning of the turn, you have to decide which of your basic Pokemon you want to put in the active spot. So he's telling us to put down Goldeen, and at this part, you can actually check out the card, See its retreat cost, weakness, resistance, attack, HP, all that good stuff. So you can see Goldeen has 40 health. It has Horn Attack, which does 10 damage, but requires a single water energy. Has a weakness to lightning, no resistance, and no retreat cost. So he wants us to put this in the active spot, so we'll set this down in the active spot. And now at this point before we start, we can also put down Pokemon from our hand into what's called the bench, which serves to fill out the rest of our roster. So we can't put down Seeking because Seeking is an evolution of Goldeen, and Goldeen hasn't been down for a full turn yet, so we can't evolve it. We can put down Staryu because he's also a basic Pokemon. So we can see it's a water type, requires 1 water energy to do Slap, retreat cost of 1, weakness to lightning. So just in case we need some backup for Goldeen, we'll put him down there. It's generally a good idea to have at least one Pokemon on your bench, because one of the win conditions for your opponent is to knock out all of the Pokemon that you have on your table. And if you don't have any Pokemon on the bench to replace your active Pokemon when it's knocked out, you lose no matter how many Pokemon you have in your hand. And last but not least, before we start the game, we lay down what are called prize cards, which we use to keep track of how many Pokemon each player has knocked out. So generally you would put down 6 prize cards if you're playing this IRL, but in the game here, I guess they want to make things go a little bit faster, so they set it so that we only need to knock out 2 of our opponent's Pokemon in order to win. And whenever you knock out one of your opponent's Pokemon, you get to take one of the prize cards you put down, so you get an extra card. And we also decide by coin flip who goes first. So unlike the regular Pokemon game, you don't both put in your inputs at the same time and then the game decides by who's faster who attacks first. You go turn-based because there are a number of different things that you can do in your turn besides attack. So since we got ahead, we get to go first. So we draw a card off of our deck, we get another energy card. And now there are a number of different things we can do within our turn. So he's going to tell us we should attach a water energy card to Goldeen and attack with Goldeen. So you can see our opponent put down a Machop, and at this point we can also look into our opponent's area, his Pokemon. You can see he's only put down a single Pokemon in the active spot, so if we're able to knock this thing out before he puts down another one, then we would win, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that. Machop, you can see, is a fighting type, only requires 1 fighting energy to do 20 damage with Low Kick, which doesn't have any added effects, weakness to Psychic, 1 retreat cost. So it's at this point we're able to also put down on the table any more basic Pokemon that we want to put on our bench. We can't evolve Goldeen because it hasn't been down for a full turn yet. We can play trainer cards, but Full Heal heals status ailments, which I'll explain when they come into play. But none of our Pokemon are under status ailments right now, so there's no point to do that. We can only play a single energy card per turn, no matter how many energy cards we have in our hand. So we might as well put it to good use. We'll put it on Goldeen, so the Goldeen can use its Horn Attack, and when we attack, that will be the end of our turn. So we'll do 10 damage to Machop. And that's the end of our turn. Now it's Sam's turn. He draws a card, he puts a fighting energy on his Machop, and he's able to do 20 damage to our Goldeen. So in one more attack, he's going to have our Goldeen knocked out. We draw a card on our next turn, we get another water energy. So he's right, we do want to get our Goldeen out of the active spot so that we don't get knocked out next turn, because that puts him halfway to victory. So we can either retreat it back to the bench, or as he's suggesting, we would evolve it into a Seeking, and then attach a Psychic energy to it because it meets its colorless energy requirement for its next attack. That allows us to keep water energy for other water Pokemon. So since our Goldeen has already been down for a full turn, we'll be able to put Seeking down and evolve our Goldeen. So not only will it be able to do a Horn Attack for a single water energy for 10 damage, but we can also do Waterfall if we put another energy card on it. And as you can see, it has a requirement of 1 water and 1 colorless, meaning that as long as we have 1 water energy on Seeking, we could put any other kind of energy on it to meet the requirement for Waterfall, which is why he told us to put the Psychic energy on it. We only have water Pokemon, so we might as well save the water energy for when we need them. So let's play it on Goldeen. Not only will it gain that extra attack, but it'll also gain 30 more health, so it won't get knocked out next turn. Now we can play our Psychic Energy. That meets the requirement for Waterfall. We can do 30 damage to Machop. So if he doesn't have any more basic Pokemon to put on the bench, we would win next turn. Unfortunately, he does. He's able to put a Rattata on the bench, meaning that if we knock out Machop, he can replace it with Rattata. So now we draw another card, it's another Water Energy. And since Seeking has all the energy it needs to meet all of its attack requirements, we might as well put the Water Energy on Staryu, because there's no need to put it on Seeking. So we can use any kind of attack. He's telling us to use Horn Attack, but even if we used Waterfall, it really wouldn't make a difference. I think he'll force us to repeat our turn if we don't do exactly what he says. But we can also take this time to check out the Rattata he put down, which only has 30 health, but is able to do 20 damage with any kind of energy. So it's pretty frail, but it can also do 20 damage with any kind of energy. So we'll put the Water Energy on Staryu, so it's ready to attack when it has to, and we'll do a Horn Attack to finish off his Machop. So now that he has 50 damage and only 50 health, his Machop is knocked out. The Machop and all cards attached to it are discarded, and we're able to draw a prize card. So we get an extra card from one of the two that we put down at the beginning of the game. So he switches in his Rattata from the bench, he evolved it into Eradicate, and now he's able to do Bite for 20 damage. So now that we have a Drowsy, we can put Drowsy on the bench, and he wants us to attach a Water Energy to Drowsy for some reason, and then attack with Waterfall so we do the most damage. So we can see Drowsy, he's a Psychic type, he can do Pound for 10 damage, or Confuse Ray for 2 Psychic, and that could potentially confuse the opponent. I don't think we'll actually get to see Drowsy in play, but we might as well do what he wants us to do. So I think he wants us to put a Water Energy on Drowsy so we could Pound later on for some silly reason. But we'll do as much damage to Eradicate as we can on this turn. Unfortunately, that means sacrificing Seeking, because we're not going to be able to survive his next attack, but we have another Pokemon that's ready to attack, and he only has 30 health left. But both of us only have one prize card left, so whoever knocks out the next Pokemon is going to win. Now at this point, since one of our active Pokemon has been knocked out, we have to decide who to replace it after being knocked out. So we can either choose Staryu or Drowsy, and since Drowsy is a Psychic type, the Eradicate is going to resist our attacks, so we won't be able to do it any damage. So, I don't know why, but at this point they don't allow you to check the opponent's side, so you need to remember who you're bringing in your Pokemon to face. But because we have Drowsy here, and Eradicate is going to resist Psychic, we'll want to send out Staryu instead. So we draw a Potion, and that'll allow us to heal off 20 damage at any given point. But right now he wants us to attach another Water Energy to Staryu, so we're prepared if we get a Stormy, because Stormy has a lot of energy requirements for its attacks. So we'll grab a Water Energy, we'll drop it on Staryu just in case we happen to get a Stormy, because our Drowsy doesn't need any more Water Energies to do anything. And we'll slap Eradicate for 20 damage. So he's put down a Machop. If he's smart, he'll retreat, so that we don't knock him out next turn. And he'll do 20 damage to us with Low Kick. So now the problem is, if he gets another Low Kick off on our Staryu, we're dead! So what we can do, if you remember we picked up a Potion on the last turn, that'll allow us to recover 20 damage that he just did to us on the last turn. We can attach another Water Energy just in case we get a Stormy, and then attack with Slap for 20 damage. So let's heal off that 20 damage he did to us, put another Water Energy on just in case we get a Stormy, and attack him. So he's doing the same thing, preparing if he gets a Machoke, which also requires more energy to attack. Hopefully we get a Stormy on this turn, And thankfully, it's contrived so that we do get a Stormy. So we can evolve our Staryu into a Stormy, and attack with Star Freeze, which will do 20 damage, and also potentially Paralyze. So Paralysis works in a way I don't think I was supposed to attach the water energy. I think he's going to tell me to repeat the turn. That was force of habit. Oh no, he's not going to. That's fine. So Paralysis, if your opponent is struck with it, they cannot attack or retreat until their turn is over. At which point, we can just proceed to murder them. So we attack again with Star Freeze, knock out our opponent's Machop, and draw our final prize card, meaning that we win the battle. And that's pretty much how these games go. So if you guys have any questions about how the trading card game works after this point, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. Like I said before, the objective of this wasn't to cover absolutely everything in the game, but just to explain the general mechanics of how it works, so that when we get into the meat of the game, you have some idea of what's going on, and I'll try to explain all of the individual cards, Pokemon powers, and that sort of stuff when it actually becomes relevant. But until then, I hope you guys learned enough about this so that you won't be confused when we start the Let's Play proper, and if you have any ideas for what kind of card decks you want me to use throughout, the video will still be available at least for the next 2 weeks if you're watching this at the time the video goes up, and I'm really looking forward to hear the kinds of decks that you guys have come up with. So this is UniversalGiant. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you when we start the game proper.